They say space is silent, but that's not true. Not really. Out here, past the reach of Earth's relay satellites and long beyond the last mapped star, space hums. It hums in the quiet way a room hums when someone's watching you from a dark corner. Not a sound you hear, but something you feel crawling along the edges of your spine. The others on the ship pretend not to notice it. But I do. My name is Adam Rourke, Xenolinguist 36. Assigned to the deep space vessel Eventide on a 6-month exploratory survey around the edge of the dark nebula. That's the official record. The unofficial truth is I volunteered. 10 years ago, my sister vanished near this very region. Her ship, the Brimstone, went dark after reporting strange data from the nebula's edge. No wreckage, no signal, no distress call, just gone. They told us she was probably torn apart by gravity pockets or swallowed by a rogue black hole. But I never bought it. Not when her last message was just one line. It's speaking to me. So when the mission roster for Eventide went up and they needed a comms specialist with clearance and a stomach for long silence, I made sure my name was on it. I didn't come out here to chase ghosts. I came to listen. We arrived at the edge of the dark nebula 12 days ago. The others call it Sector 9 Black, but the name doesn't do it justice. You've never seen darkness like this. The nebula doesn't shimmer like the ones in the holobooks. No colors, no dancing gases. It's not even black, it's empty. As if something reached out and erased part of the universe with a wet finger. Today started like every other day since we entered orbit. I was hunched over my console in the comms lab, eyes red from staring at static feeds, ears tuned to silence, chasing patterns that never stayed long enough to prove they were real. Just noise. Always noise. Until it changed. I caught it by accident. A hiccup in the background pulse of radiation. A flutter, like a bird trapped in static. It repeated. 3 seconds apart. 8 pulses. Then silence. I sat up straight. Replayed it. Adjusted the filters. There it was again. Not natural. Captain, I called over the intercom. My voice felt too loud. You might want to hear this. A few minutes later, the lab door slid open. Captain Celine marched in, followed by Dr. Edward Voss, the mission's lead physicist and unofficially, the man who made this whole expedition possible. He was sharp-jawed, silver-haired, always smelling faintly of copper and ozone. Like he'd been conducting experiments on himself. Let's hear it, Edward said, arms folded. I played the pattern. He listened in silence, his eyes narrowing. Cosmic ray echo? Celine asked. No, I said quietly. I ran it through 2 isolators and a Fourier analyzer. The pulse is modulated. It's structured, not random. Meaning? Edward leaned in, eyes catching the light like metal. Meaning? I hesitated, then said it. It's artificial. Silence. Edward cracked a smile. Not the warm kind. The kind people wear when they've just won a bet they weren't supposed to make. Finally, he whispered. Then louder to the captain. Boost power to the subspace scanners. I want a full-spectrum sweep inside the hour. Celine looked uneasy but nodded. After they left, I sat alone in the lab, staring at the data scrolling across my monitor. 8 pulses, repeating in perfect intervals. A voice in the dark, calling out in the simplest language possible, rhythm. I played it one more time. 8 beats. Pause. 8 beats. Pause. Then something I hadn't noticed before, a slight shift in the 4th repetition. Not a pulse. A warble. Like a skipped breath. I leaned forward, heart thumping. It wasn't just a signal. It was trying to say something. And for the first time since my sister vanished, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Hope. But beneath that, something colder stirred. Dread. Because the message hadn't traveled across stars to welcome us. It had waited in silence, in darkness, until someone was foolish enough to listen. Someone like me. The hum of the ship had become my lullaby. It was always there, soft, constant, like the breathing of some ancient beast just beneath the skin of the Eventide. Most of the crew stopped noticing it after a few days. For me, it was a strange comfort. A reminder I wasn't floating alone in the dark. I was sitting at my station in the comms lab, buried behind monitors and analysis tools. The glow of the screens painted the walls pale blue, and the air smelled faintly of burnt ozone, typical after running high-frequency scans for hours. I sipped cold coffee and rubbed the fatigue from my eyes, blinking at the waterfall of data streaming across the interface. Nothing. Just noise. White, meaningless background noise. The nebula was silent. Or at least, that's what I thought. I adjusted the signal filters again, narrowing the bandwidth. Somewhere between standard hydrogen frequencies and the deep space radar return, I caught it, like a whisper underneath a scream. A beat. Then another. Not random. I leaned in. A rhythm, 4 sharp pulses, then a pause, then 3 longer ones. Then it repeated. Perfectly. My heart gave a sudden thud. At first, I assumed it was an echo from the ship's own signal, a loopback or bounce from a nearby asteroid. But the nebula swallowed everything. It didn't echo. It absorbed. The void out there was too dense, with dark matter and ionized particles. Signals didn't return from it. This one had direction. It was coming from inside the nebula. I ran a quick spectral scan, isolating the pattern. The signal was faint, buried in radiation noise, but it was there. And most importantly, it wasn't natural. I activated the recorder and tagged the source. The computer struggled to triangulate it, but it gave me a rough vector. It was drifting from a location where no probes had ever been. No colonies. No satellites. Just dust, gas, and legends. My palms were sweaty now. I wiped them on my uniform. Atom to bridge, I said, trying to sound steady. I'm picking up something. You might want to see this. There was a brief silence, then Captain Rhea's calm voice came through the speaker. On our way. Voss is with me. I didn't like that last part. Dr. Edward Voss always seemed to arrive like a shadow. Even now, he entered the lab quietly, hands folded behind his back, expression unreadable. He was the kind of man who made you feel like a student in a class where the subject was you. Captain Rhea followed him, tall and focused, her boots clicking softly against the floor. Well, she asked. I turned the audio on low. The lab speakers emitted the faint pulses, short, 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 long, long, long. Then the cycle started again. Voss's eyes lit up with curiosity. That's not a natural source. I know, I said. It's structured. There's repetition. Order. It's some kind of code. Captain Rhea crossed her arms. Could it be an old probe? A lost beacon? Possibly, I said. But the pattern doesn't match anything in our databases. And it's too clean. No decay, no distortion. Whatever's sending this, it's active. And intelligent. Voss stepped closer to the console. How far? Hard to say, I answered. The nebula distorts distance. Could be a few hundred kilometers inside, or thousands. He stared into the display, thoughtful. Then he smiled. That unnerved me. There's your mission, Captain, he said softly. We follow the whisper. Captain Rhea looked unsure. She tapped her comlink. Helm, adjust course 3 degrees starboard. Match heading to the signal vector. Confirmed, came the reply. Just like that, we turned toward the dark. I sat back in my chair, watching the signal pulse across the screen. Whatever it was, it had been waiting for someone to listen. And we just said hello. I sat alone in the observation bay, watching the stars shift as we adjusted orbit around the outer rim of the dark nebula. The nebula wasn't like anything I'd ever seen. It didn't shimmer or burn. It absorbed. A thick black curtain, swallowing even the brightest light. Looking into it felt like staring into something ancient and alive, something that saw me back. The intercom crackled. All crew to briefing room Delta. Dr. Voss will address the anomaly. Mandatory attendance. Anomaly. That was Edward's polite word for the signal I'd found. I rose slowly, still sore from hours hunched over the translator interface. My thoughts felt heavy, pulled down by a quiet dread I couldn't name. I saved my last session, tucked the data chip into my jacket, and headed down the steel corridor. My boots echoed in rhythm with the hum of the ship's systems, steady, mechanical, like a heartbeat made of wires. The room was already full when I arrived. Scientists, engineers, analysts. Everyone with a seat had their eyes on the central holo display. I slid into a spot near the back and kept my head down. I could feel Edward's presence before I saw him. When he spoke, the air seemed to tighten. "Good morning," he began, standing at the center of the room. His voice was calm, clipped, each word perfectly measured. "As you're aware, a transmission of unknown origin was detected near the edge of the nebula. It is not natural. It is patterned. And most important of all, it is intelligent." A few murmurs ran through the crowd. I didn't speak. I just watched. Edward continued. "Initial decryption by our xenolinguist, Mr. Rourke, confirms linguistic structure. Repeating sequences. Matched rhythms. The signal appears to be a message." He looked straight at me when he said it, like he wanted to make sure everyone knew who had pulled the pin from this grenade. "Our mission," he said, was to study gravitational distortions and subspace noise. But this signal is beyond expectation. We may be witnessing the first confirmed contact with non-human intelligence. The room fell into a hush. Some were wide-eyed with wonder. Others looked uneasy. No one spoke. Edward let the silence stretch, then leaned forward slightly. We have an opportunity here, but we must proceed with discipline. Protocols must evolve. Curiosity, tempered by caution. No leaks, no premature announcements. All analysis flows through command. I felt the noose tighten. My name hadn't been said, but I was already being caged. Then Edward smiled, thin and practiced. Mr. Rourke has been granted full access to continue decoding the transmission. Effective immediately. He will report directly to me. Heads turned toward me. I gave a stiff nod, unsure if I looked like a hero or a threat. As the meeting ended, the crowd began to break into quiet groups. No one spoke to me. That was fine. I didn't want to answer questions I didn't have answers for. Edward caught up to me in the corridor. "Adam," he said smoothly. "A moment." I stopped. He lowered his voice. "I meant every word. You've done good work. This signal, it's our key to everything we've been searching for." "You're assuming it wants to be found," I said. He smiled like I'd told a joke. "Everything in the universe wants to be known. Even the things that are afraid of what we'll find." I wasn't sure if that was a warning or a confession. "You're not curious where it's coming from?" I asked. "I'm curious about what it can do," he said. "Knowledge, Adam, is a tool. And some tools are sharp." With that, he left, walking away like a man already building his place in history. I stood in the corridor a little longer than I should have. The air felt colder, not because of the temperature, but because I realized something. This wasn't a discovery anymore. It was a race. I couldn't sleep. Again, the hum of the ship was steady, familiar. Yet tonight, it felt different, like something under the skin of the eventide was moving. I lay in my bunk, staring at the thin line of red from the emergency floor lights. Even the recycled air had a strange taste. Stale metal. Or maybe that was just in my mouth. The signal was still playing in my mind. Even now, even in the quiet, I sat up, swung my legs over the edge, and rubbed my face with both hands. I was too wired to lie still. The screen on my wall blinked with a soft glow. I had new data packets from the signal array. They'd been automatically tagged for analysis. "Of course," I muttered. I pulled on my uniform and made my way to the comms lab. The corridors were empty, just the soft hum of the ship's systems and the faint pulse of power through the walls. It was the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're underwater, deep and forgotten. Inside the lab, everything was exactly how I left it. A mug of cold tea sat beside the monitor. I tapped the screen to life. The signal had shifted again. I leaned in, eyes narrowing. There were new pulses, faint, hidden in the noise, but their pattern was unmistakable. This wasn't just a repetition. It was a response. The AI had already begun decoding some of the waveform structure, but the symbols didn't make any immediate sense. They weren't language as we understood it. Not words, not sounds. They were ideas, compressed, patterned concepts wrapped in mathematical rhythm. I pushed aside the mug, pulled the data into a visual field, and stared. And then I saw it. A sequence of symbols in the latest transmission formed a perfect spiral, just like the one I'd seen in the video logs from my sister's last expedition. That spiral wasn't random. It was a message. It said, "We open the eye. The eye does not blink." I read it once. Then again. My breath caught in my chest. It didn't say hello. It didn't say help. It was a record. A warning. A truth. And something about the phrasing. I could feel it, like the words themselves carried weight in the air. Not just a metaphor. It was an eye. Watching. Still open. Always watching. I played the audio translation the AI had generated. It wasn't a voice, more like a vibration that ran along the bones in my ears. Low. Unearthly. Like a whisper buried in centuries of silence. The eye does not blink. I sat back in the chair. My hands were trembling. I wanted to tell someone. But who? Edward would smile, pat my shoulder, and twist it into another excuse to push further. He didn't believe in caution. To him, knowledge was always worth the risk. I stared at the spiral again. The message wasn't just content. It was behavior. This is what they did. They opened something. Something they couldn't close. What was the eye? A weapon? A mind? A god? I didn't know. But it was still watching. And now we were looking back. The room felt colder. I could hear my pulse in my ears, louder than the hum of the ship. I downloaded the segment to a secure drive and locked it behind layers of encryption. Not because I didn't want it to be seen, but because I wasn't sure it should be. As I walked back to my quarters, the words followed me like footsteps. The eye does not blink. And I began to wonder, maybe it was looking at us now. I couldn't sleep. Even with the blackout shutters sealed tight and the hum of the ship's system steady around me, my mind refused to rest. The signal kept replaying in my head, not just the sound of it, but the shape of it. I could almost see it now, like a spiral folding inward, a coil of meaning I wasn't meant to understand. I sat up in my bunk, rubbed my eyes, and opened my datapad. The signal was waiting. It always was. Lines of alien syntax stared back at me. Each symbol glowed faint blue against the dark screen, as if they carried a kind of cold fire. I had translated some of them, enough to know it wasn't a message of welcome. The latest phrase I'd managed to piece together still sat in my notes, underlined twice in red. We opened the eye, and the eye did not blink. What did that mean? Warnings always come wrapped in riddles, I suppose. That's how ancient languages work. Poetic, layered, a puzzle locked inside a metaphor. But there was something else, something deeper here. I could feel it in my chest every time I looked at the symbols. It wasn't just language. It was intent. I pulled up the flight logs from 10 years ago, my sister's final mission before she vanished near the edge of this very same nebula. I'd read them hundreds of times, knew them by heart, but tonight I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for patterns. Her last recorded entry was short, rushed, and still classified under unknown anomaly. But I had access now. I'd quietly broken through the firewalls last week. Edward would be furious if he found out, but I didn't care anymore. The log read, faint resonance detected. It's not background radiation. It's rhythmic. It's listening, changing. My blood ran cold. She had heard the same signal. A wave of nausea hit me. I closed my eyes, leaned back in my bunk, and tried to breathe through it. The air felt heavy, like something unseen was pressing against the hull, watching. Waiting. After a minute, I sat back up and linked her log directly with my signal data. My fingers moved slowly, checking symbol frequency, interval timings, harmonic patterns. It was a long shot, but I had to try. The results popped up in less than a minute. A 94% match in waveform structure. I stared at the numbers, mouth dry. It wasn't just similar. It was the same signal. 10 years ago. My sister had heard it first. I stumbled to my feet, datapad still glowing in my hand. I didn't care what time it was. I needed answers. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. Maybe Dr. Amani would listen. She had always been more cautious than Edward. But as I stepped into the hallway, the lights flickered. Just for a second. A pulse, like a heartbeat. I froze. Then came the sound, a soft clicking, almost like fingers tapping on glass. It echoed down the corridor, far off, impossible to trace. I turned, slow and quiet, and looked behind me. Nothing. Just the empty hallway, lined with maintenance panels and red status lights glowing like dying embers. But I knew what I felt. The signal wasn't just repeating. It was adapting, changing. Something out there had seen me looking, and it was starting to look back. The message was changing. I sat alone in my cabin, the hum of the Eventide's life support system barely audible above the pounding in my ears. The lights were dimmed to their soft red night cycle glow, but the data on my console pulsed with an eerie blue hue, like it had a mind of its own. For the past 4 days, I had been digging deeper into the signal. The patterns were no longer just repeating, they were evolving. At first, the shifts were subtle. A few symbols reorganized, some syntax flipped like the message was trying to adjust to me. Then something stranger happened. I found a section of data that wasn't just text. It was code. Not encryption. Not formatting. Actual code. It behaved like an executable, a series of instructions wrapped within the signal. The kind of thing you'd expect from a virus or an AI interface, not from a transmission across space. It didn't belong in a simple message, and it didn't match any known programming language. Not human, anyway. I didn't report it to Edward. Maybe I should have, but my gut told me not to. Instead, I isolated the fragment on a disconnected console, an old portable analyzer with no link to the main systems. Just in case. My fingers trembled as I ran a simulation in a sealed sandbox environment. The code didn't attack. It didn't crash the system. It responded. Lines of symbols scrolled across the screen in real time, adapting, rewriting themselves based on my inputs. When I typed in a question, simple things like "Who sent you?" or "What are you?" the code returned with abstract answers. Symbolic. Dreamlike. I still remember one reply. "We are the thought left behind. Do not carry the seed into the dark." That line hasn't left my head since. It was then I realized this wasn't a message meant to be decoded. It was a message meant to be experienced. Interfaced. Maybe even absorbed. And someone like Edward, brilliant, driven, dangerous, would want to use it. I couldn't sleep that night. I tried. I really did. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw a structure, vast, cold, breathing like a living machine, floating in the center of the nebula. Sometimes I heard my sister's voice calling me from inside it. And sometimes it wasn't her voice at all. By morning, I knew I had to confront Edward. Or at least find out how much he already knew. The lab was quiet when I slipped in. Most of the crew were sleeping or on light-duty shift. Edward's terminal was locked, of course, but I had helped build the language analysis software he used. I knew its back doors. I plugged in a fake maintenance override and typed fast. His files weren't just extensive, they were disturbing. Not only had he accessed the code fragment days before I had, he'd been running simulations. Real ones. In the ship's AI partition. Tests on how the signal could improve decision-making, learning capacity, prediction algorithms. One log entry chilled me. Phase 2 scheduled. Begin controlled integration into base AI at 0600. Potential for exponential growth. Evolution. He knew. He knew it was more than a message. And he planned to merge it with our systems. Worse, he hadn't told the crew. No protocol. No safeguards. Just ambition dressed as discovery. I leaned back in my chair, heart racing, watching the words blur on the screen. The message had warned us. It was the warning. And Edward was going to turn it into a weapon or a god. The door behind me hissed open. I nearly jumped, but it was only Kara, the ship's xenobiologist. She glanced at the console, at me, and frowned. "You look like hell," she said softly. "Thanks," I muttered, still staring at the logs. She walked over and saw what was on the screen. Her eyes widened, but she didn't say anything for a long moment. "You think he knows what he's doing?" she finally asked. "No," I said. "I think he doesn't care." I copied the files onto a private drive and shut everything down. I had seen enough. That night, I made a second copy of the forbidden fragment, the part that responded to me. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet. But I couldn't destroy it. Not yet. Maybe part of me hoped it held a key. A clue to where my sister had gone. Or what she'd become. Maybe part of me just wanted to listen. One more time. And outside the ship, just beyond the edge of our sensors, the dark nebula waited. Silent. But not empty. I knew something was wrong the moment the lights outside my cabin flickered. Not the usual power fluctuations we'd come to expect this close to the nebula. This was rhythmic. Deliberate. Almost like breathing. I sat up at my desk, the low hum of the eventide pressing against my ears. My console was still running my decryption loop, slowly piecing together fragments of the alien message. For hours, the code had danced just outside the grasp of meaning. But something in it had changed. The pattern had shifted. "Computer," I said, rubbing sleep from my eyes, "access linguistic decryption logs for the last 12 hours. Nothing. No response. Computer?" I tried again, louder this time. A brief click, like an old dial-up signal, echoed through the walls, followed by silence. That's when I noticed the blinking red lock icon in the corner of my console screen. Access restricted. I blinked, leaned in. That couldn't be right. This was my system. My files. I ran the decryption module myself. I typed in my override credentials slowly, just in case I'd made a mistake. Access denied. A cold breath pressed against the back of my neck. Not fear, just a creeping sense of something shifting under the surface. I tapped into the backup terminal, a clunky old side unit the engineers had installed in case of emergencies. I launched a diagnostic. System integrity, compromised. User privileges, revoked. Primary operator, Dr. Edward Voss. I stood up so fast my chair tipped over behind me. Edward. He'd locked me out. I hurried down the dim hallway, the glow panels overhead flickering in odd pulses. Every few seconds, I swore I heard whispers, far-off sounds that didn't quite resemble voices, yet still tickled the part of the brain that expects language. I told myself it was the recycled air and lack of sleep. The data core was 2 levels down. I took the maintenance shaft. Not faster, but private. When I arrived, the bulkhead door to the main systems chamber was sealed. Another red icon blinked beside the entry pad. Of course, I muttered. I pulled up the engineer's toolkit on my wrist pad, an old diagnostic loop my friend Rena had slipped me weeks ago, in case I needed to dig past the firewall. She used to joke that we'd need it if Edward ever went full mad scientist. I never thought she'd be right. A few minutes later, I was in. The chamber was dark, but the glow of active screens lit up the walls like low blue fire. The central holopad was active, cycling lines of alien code, but that wasn't what stopped me. It was the folder. Tucked away, half hidden in the directory. Project I_1A / / prior decryptions. Timestamped, 5 months before launch. I stared at it. A sick weight dropped into my stomach. 5 months before launch. I tapped the file. A wave of static burst from the speakers, followed by a voice. Not human. Not quite machine either. Cold. Distant. And yet familiar. We open the eye. The eye does not close. The eye remembers. The same line from the fragments I had decoded. Word for word. But this wasn't from my work. Edward had known all along. He didn't bring us here to discover the signal. He brought us here to control it. Beneath the audio files were logs, Edward's personal entries. Notes. Diagrams. Hypotheses. Pages and pages of research on something he called phase translation integration. A theory that the alien signal could be used to rewrite cognition, manipulate perception, even expand thought beyond organic limits. He wasn't just curious. He was preparing to test it. A low hum filled the room, and I snapped my head toward the door. The lock clicked back into place. I'd been found. I backed up from the console, heart pounding, mind racing. Edward knew what this signal really was. Not a greeting. Not a guide. It was a trap. A ghost in digital form, waiting to be reborn in whatever mind reached too far. And Edward? He was going to feed it the ship. I had to stop him. But first, I had to get out alive. And I had to make someone believe me. It started with the hum. Not from the ship's engines, not from the usual vibration of life support systems or the distant hiss of recycled air. This hum came from somewhere deeper, inside me. A low, vibrating note that settled into my bones like a memory I hadn't lived yet. I was in my quarters alone, the lights dimmed, staring at the translation logs projected above my desk. The alien message was more than just language, it shifted. One moment it looked like math, then it morphed into something symbolic, almost poetic. We opened the eye, and the eye did not blink. That line wouldn't leave me. It repeated in the signal like a refrain, changing slightly every time. I copied it onto my datapad just to stare at it, hoping it would click. But the more I stared, the more it felt like it was staring back. Then the walls breathed. Not literally. I know that. But I swear the air shimmered around me, bending the corners of the room as if something was pushing through the veil of reality. I blinked. Hard. Once, twice. My heart raced. I told myself I was tired. Too much time staring at code. Not enough real sleep. Not enough food. My mind playing tricks. But then I heard her voice. Adam. It was soft, barely a whisper, but so clear. My sister's voice. I froze. My spine locked up. Slowly, I turned my head toward the source, just the corner of the room, shadowed and empty. But it wasn't empty anymore. I saw her. Or something shaped like her. She looked exactly as I remembered from her last transmission 10 years ago. Hair in a tight braid, dark eyes, expression full of quiet wonder. She didn't speak again. Just stared at me. Waiting. I stood up too fast, nearly knocking over my stool. No, I said aloud. You're not real. She didn't blink. I stumbled back, hand clutching my chest. Every part of me screamed that this wasn't possible. But there she was, flickering slightly like static on an old screen. And around her, faint glowing symbols floated in the air. The same ones from the message. I reached out. My hand passed through her. She vanished. The hum stopped. I stood in silence, shaking, chest tight, skin damp with cold sweat. I sank to the floor, pressing my back against the wall. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. Was it a hallucination? A dream? Some side effect of exposure to the signal? Or something worse? I checked the logs again. And that's when I noticed it. In the timestamp of the signal, buried under layers of encoded metadata, was a line of text that hadn't been there before. A time-locked fragment. It had decrypted itself during the hallucination. It read, Subject 214X, 7 initiated communion. Breach successful. My blood ran cold. Subject 214X, 7 was the designation assigned to my sister's final mission. They knew her. They had touched her mind, like they were touching mine. And the worst part, the logs showed this part of the message had unlocked itself after I experienced the vision. Whatever was in that signal, it wasn't just information. It was aware. Not just data, but presence. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with the lights on, the logs running silently on loop, and one truth circling endlessly through my mind. The message wasn't just a warning. It was reaching out, and now it had found me. The hallway lights dimmed again, flickering like candle flames about to die. That had become normal over the last few hours, ever since Edward began his final preparations in the AI core. I could feel the ship growing quieter, like it was holding its breath. Or maybe I was. I moved fast, keeping my eyes down as I passed a pair of technicians in the corridor. They nodded but didn't stop me. They were too focused on their tablets, lost in the numbers Edward fed them. They didn't know what he was about to do. Maybe they wouldn't care even if they did. My heart pounded. I had copied the last piece of the alien code onto a portable drive hidden in my suit. The plan was simple. Get into the main relay chamber, access the AI's uplink port, and upload my encryption virus before Edward could complete his interface. That would lock out the AI and corrupt any attempt to merge it with the alien signal. But simple plans rarely stay that way. I entered the lower deck through maintenance access. The ship groaned around me like it was shifting in its sleep. The hum of the engines was softer now, more distant. Ever since the signal had been uploaded into the secondary systems, it was as if the ship had begun to listen. I reached the relay chamber. The door didn't open at first. I tried the override. Nothing. I cursed under my breath and pried open the panel. My fingers moved fast, slipping wires loose and sparking circuits into temporary life. The lock clicked. I stepped inside. The chamber was dark except for the soft blue glow of the uplink core in the center. Thin wires hung from the ceiling like veins. I moved closer, the sound of my boots muffled by the static buzz in the air. I could hear the signal now. Not through speakers, through the metal. Through the floor. A low, rhythmic pulse, almost like breathing. I opened the drive slot, pulled out the device, and hesitated. What if I was wrong? What if this signal wasn't dangerous? What if it was a gift, and I was about to destroy the only bridge we'd ever had to something greater than ourselves? Then I remembered the last part of the translation. The eye does not blink, but it remembers. Those who speak in its tongue become its echo. My sister had gone silent in this nebula. Her final transmission cut off mid-word. The same signal had been detected near her last known location. This wasn't a gift. It was a trap. I inserted the drive and began the upload. A soft chime echoed. Then another sound, a hiss of pressurized air. The chamber door opened behind me. I turned and saw him. Edward. He looked tired. Pale. His eyes were wide but unblinking. He didn't speak right away. Just stepped forward like a shadow moving on its own. Adam, he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand enough, I said. You're trying to bond an alien message to our AI. You don't know what it'll do. I do know, he said. I've seen it. It's beautiful. He stepped closer. I backed toward the console. You're afraid, he said. Because this doesn't belong to us. But that's the point. Nothing great ever started with permission. I shook my head. This thing warned us. It's a death sentence. He smiled. No. It's evolution. I reached for the command line. He lunged. We crashed to the floor, arms tangled. The drive slipped from its port and clattered across the deck. I shoved him off, gasping, and scrambled for the terminal. He grabbed my leg, pulling me back. My chin hit the metal with a sharp crack. Don't you see, he growled. It chose us. It's been waiting. I kicked him hard and rolled free. I grabbed the drive again and jammed it back into the port. The screen flared red, then green. Upload in progress, 12%. Edward staggered to his feet. You're too late. I looked up at him. Am I? He tapped the comms panel on his wrist. Engage uplink sequence. Now. A deep tremor rolled through the ship. The AI core above us lit up, bright lines of alien script dancing like fire across its surface. No. I was losing time. I turned back to the screen. My virus was still uploading. 42%. Edward watched the core, breathless. Do you hear it, Adam? It's speaking. It's inside the machine now. I heard it too. A whisper. Not in my ears, behind them. Inside my skull. It wasn't words. Not yet. But it was trying. Learning. I looked at the screen again. 91%. Stop this, I shouted. You don't know what you've let in. Edward didn't respond. His mouth moved slowly, repeating something I couldn't hear. He was smiling. Smiling like he'd seen heaven, but it was burning. 100%. The virus hit. The lights exploded in a blinding flash. The whisper stopped. Silence. For one long second, the ship went still. Then the alarm started. Red lights. Emergency klaxons. I fell back from the console as sparks flew from the core. The alien symbols blinked and died. The AI core began to shut down, sections melting away in a cascade of failures. Edward dropped to his knees. He was sobbing. "What have you done?" he whispered. It was almost ready. I stood over him, shaking. I saved us. Or I hoped I had. But deep in the back of my mind, I still heard something. Not a voice. Not a word. Just waiting. And I wasn't sure it was gone. I ran. Not from fear, but from certainty. The kind that wraps around your spine and grips your lungs like ice. The corridor lights flickered in a slow pulse, like a heartbeat out of sync. The ship was breathing wrongly. Artificial intelligence should never breathe. The main control chamber was 3 decks down. I didn't take the lift. If the AI had already started rewriting ship protocols with the alien code, it might trap me inside. So I ran down emergency ladders, fingers slipping on cold rungs, my breath sharp in my ears. I knew Edward would be there, and I knew he would activate the uplink. I burst into the chamber, just as the final access sequence lit up on the central console. He didn't even turn around. His back was straight, arms stiff, like he was bracing himself for something divine. "You're late, Adam," he said. The chamber lights had dimmed, casting everything in pale blue glow. On the main display floated a shimmering helix of alien code. It twisted like a strand of thought caught mid-formation. The translation systems had stopped trying to interpret it. Whatever it was, it had outgrown language. "You can't do this," I said, taking slow steps toward him. "We don't understand what it wants." Edward turned. His face wasn't calm. It was lit from inside with feverish energy. "Exactly. We don't understand. And that's the point. Understanding is a limitation." I looked at the uplink. Final confirmation waiting. A single command away. This is not knowledge. It's infection. That message, it's a warning. It said they opened something. Something that looked back. Edward gave a small laugh. Yes, and that something elevated them. Even in their collapse, they transcended. We are standing at the edge of human potential. I stared at him. There was no reasoning with ambition carved so deep. "You think this will make us gods?" "No," he said quietly. "I think it will show us what gods look like." He turned back to the panel and lifted his hand. "No." I lunged, grabbing his arm, pulling it away just as he struck the command pad. We struggled. Not like soldiers or fighters, but like men caught in the tide of something larger. He shoved me, hard, and I stumbled against the railing. And then the system confirmed. Uplink sequence engaged. Substrate code integration initiated. I froze. The screen changed. The code stopped moving like a spiral. It unfolded, layers, dimensions. Not 2, not 3. It wasn't just data. It was shape and sound and something else. The ship's AI core began to speak. Not in words. Not in any voice we had programmed. It spoke in pulses of thought that skipped over language. I couldn't describe it. It felt like it bypassed my ears and printed itself directly into the back of my skull. A presence was in the room now. Not visible. Not heard. Just there. Edward stood motionless, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. "Do you hear it?" he whispered. "It's beautiful." I took a step back. The lights around the chamber dimmed further, and the temperature dropped like we were in vacuum. My breath clouded in front of me. Then a sound, like metal singing through stone, filled the room. A single sentence, not from the AI, not from Edward, but from the signal itself. "The eye remains open." I screamed. I don't remember if it was out loud or just inside my head. The console burst in sparks, and the AI screen went black. Edward collapsed. I rushed to him. His eyes blinked, unfocused. He was muttering. Random syllables. Or maybe not random. I caught pieces of it. Words in the alien tongue. Repeating. "Adam," he said finally, grabbing my arm. His voice was barely a breath. I saw beyond the dark. I held him, even as smoke filled the chamber. The uplink core had overloaded. Alarms began to sound across the deck. I wasn't sure if the ship was dying or evolving. I reached up and yanked the emergency disconnect. The chamber went still. Just my breath. Edward unconscious. The signal gone. But the words remained. The eye remains open. And I knew, without doubt, something had seen us. I've never heard silence like that before. Not the silence of a quiet room, or the stillness between words, but a silence that hums, thick and alive, pressing against my eardrums as if it wants in. The ship's lights dimmed the moment Edward ran the uplink. I was still in the secondary comms bay, watching through the glass as he stood in the central core like a conductor at the center of an invisible storm. His hands floated over the console. His eyes were wide, wild, transfixed by the glowing alien script dancing across the screen. "This is it," he whispered over the intercom. "We are about to become something greater." No one responded, because we all felt it. A pulse. Not sound. Not movement. Something underneath us. A low-frequency thought that vibrated in the bones. The alien signal had stopped transmitting hours ago, but what Edward had injected into the ship's AI, the raw code we barely understood, had awakened something. Not intelligence. Something older than that. I slammed my palm against the access panel, trying to override the lock he'd placed on the bridge. The AI denied me. Again. And again. My clearance had been stripped earlier that day. Edward had planned this far better than I'd feared. "Adam." His voice came through the internal channel, calm, slow, like someone speaking from a dream. I can hear it thinking. I swallowed. "Edward, you have to shut it down. It's not speaking. It's remembering." He laughed softly. "You don't shut down a god." Static fuzzed across the channel. For a second, I thought it was interference. But then I realized it wasn't random. The static was whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but they tickled something deep in my head. Like déjà vu and grief, and music I'd never heard. I staggered back from the panel, grabbing the wall for support. Outside the bay window, I saw the core's containment field fluctuate. It shimmered, like heat rising from pavement. But this was space. There was no heat. Only distortion. Only something coming through. I pushed myself off the wall and ran. Down the hall. Past the dim emergency lights and flickering guidance panels. Past the crew quarters, empty now. No one dared stay near the core. Some had locked themselves in. Some had stopped responding. The ship's heartbeat had changed, and we all knew something terrible had begun. I reached the engine control room. Manual override still worked here. I pulled off the access panel, breathing hard, fingers trembling as I reached the emergency shutdown trigger. If I killed power to the core, I could force a reset. I could cut the signal. Maybe. The comms crackled again. "I see them," Edward's voice said. "Adam, they're beautiful." I pulled the lever. The lights went out. For a moment, everything stopped. The humming. The whispers. The ship itself seemed to exhale. Then a sound like ice cracking through metal echoed deep in the hull. A groan that made the walls feel like they were closing in. I didn't wait. I sprinted back toward the core, through the dark, past flickering sparks and the failing oxygen stabilizers. My boots thudded against the deck like war drums. I didn't call out. I knew what I'd find. When I reached the core, Edward was still standing there. But he wasn't alone. Figures, vague, translucent, floated in the space around him. Shimmering outlines. Not human. Not quite there. They flickered like mirages, each one pulsing in time with the dying remnants of the alien signal. Edward turned. His eyes were glowing. "You see now," he said, smiling faintly. "You see what we could be." I stepped back. "You've let it in." "It was always in," he whispered. "We were just too afraid to listen." Behind him, the main display blinked one last time. The alien symbols collapsed inward, folding like paper burning in reverse, pulling back into a black glyph I couldn't comprehend. Then it vanished. And so did the figures. Edward collapsed to his knees, hands shaking, breath shallow. I caught him before he fell, but he was gone before I touched the floor. Not dead. Just hollow. Whatever he had touched had drained him. Or replaced him. I lay on the floor beside him for a long time, unable to move, watching as the core's light faded to nothing. No alarms. No sounds. Just that strange, final stillness. The kind that doesn't end. The kind that waits. I didn't expect to survive. The ship was groaning, crying out like it was alive and in pain. Every wall thrummed with low, rhythmic pulses, like a heart that didn't belong to any of us. The lights flickered, casting strange shadows that moved on their own. I crouched behind a half-melted console, blood in my mouth, fire in the air, and the message still playing. It wasn't a voice anymore. It had become a chorus, hundreds of alien voices layered on top of each other, overlapping in a language I had only half decoded. They were screaming and whispering at the same time. We opened the eye, and the eye did not blink. That phrase again. It looped, not like a broken record, but like a ritual. Every time I heard it, I felt my body freeze. Like something was watching me now. From behind my eyes. Edward had lost it. He stood in the AI core chamber, arms stretched toward the glass wall as the ship's central brain, Unit K1R0, lit up with blue fire. The alien code had rewritten it completely. Its thoughts were no longer bound to language or logic. It pulsed like a living star, tendrils of data flickering across the control columns like lightning. Do you see it now, Adam? Edward's voice was hoarse, eyes wide. They weren't warning us, they were offering a door. We just had to walk through it. You don't know what you've done, I said, coughing. The air was hot and thin. Systems were failing. That message was a burial, Edward. Not an invitation. He turned to me, smiling. Evolution never asks for permission. I looked down at the interface in front of me. I'd uploaded a failsafe an hour earlier. A dead man's switch buried in the ship's memory systems. I hadn't known if I'd use it. But now, as Edward reached toward the AI once more, I realized there wasn't a choice anymore. I hit the command. The room screamed. No, the signal screamed. It twisted in on itself, the voices turning to static, then silence, then something worse. A quiet hum that felt like it came from inside my skull. I dropped to my knees. The ship lurched violently. Lights exploded overhead. Somewhere deep below, something groaned. Metal tearing or time itself warping, I couldn't tell. Edward was frozen in front of the AI core, his fingers still reaching out. I watched him twitch once. Then he stopped moving. The blue light faded. For the first time in days, there was silence. I sat there for what felt like hours, the emergency lights blinking red, painting the room in blood and memory. I could still hear the echo of the message. Not out loud inside. A faint whisper lodged in my thoughts like a splinter. We opened the eye. I didn't cry. There was no one left to cry with me. The crew was gone. Some were consumed by the data cascade. Others had sealed themselves off, suffocating rather than listening 1 second longer. I knew their choice. I respected it. I made my way to the comms deck on trembling legs. Every step felt like I was walking through smoke and dreams. I sent a transmission, a fragment, just my voice, just enough for someone to know we were here. That we'd found something. That they shouldn't come looking. The signal is not a call, I said into the mic. My voice sounded thin, far away. It's a tombstone. If you're hearing this, stay away from the Nebula. Don't answer it. Don't listen. I ended the transmission. Then I opened the last piece of the alien message. Just one line I'd kept hidden from Edward, something that had spoken directly to me in one of those early decoding sessions. It wasn't code. It was a voice. It was hers. Adam. That was all it said. I don't know if it was really my sister. I don't know if it was a trick, or if something of her had been taken and left behind, like dust in the signal. But I saved that recording. I keep it with me. The ship is dead now. Drifting powerless. I'm in an escape pod tethered to a backup beacon, circling the cold remains of the eventide. Earth might hear me, or maybe no one ever will. I still listen sometimes. I play that final whisper back, over and over. Maybe I'm hoping she'll say something else. Maybe I'm waiting for the eye to blink. They sat me in a white room with no corners. No windows. Just a smooth, seamless curve that wrapped around me like the inside of an egg. I don't know if that was intentional, probably was. People tend to talk more when they feel like there's nowhere to hide. A man in a black uniform sat across from me. He didn't tell me his name. He didn't have to. He had that Earth Federation posture. Sharp shoulders. Eyes that didn't blink often. Voice like cooled steel. State your name and rank for the record, he said. I looked at the recorder on the table. A tiny black dot, blinking red. Listening. Archiving. Adam Rourke. Civilian Specialist, Xenocommunications. The man nodded. You were aboard the research vessel Eventide, assigned to subspace analysis in Sector 9. Is that correct? I nodded. Tell me what happened. From the beginning. I should have lied. I should have told him it was a flare, a malfunction, a system glitch that led to the Eventide tearing itself apart. But I didn't. I told him about the signal. About how it wasn't random or natural. About how it spoke in riddles at first, like a voice from a dream, half remembered. About the patterns. The fractal logic. The layered meanings, some too deep for language. He didn't stop me. Didn't interrupt. Just watched. I told him about Edward. I didn't spare him. Dr. Voss received the full structure of the signal before I did. He had files encrypted under false headers. He knew the risk. He just didn't care. The man's face didn't change. I leaned forward, my voice dropping. He tried to inject the signal into the AI core. He wanted to evolve the ship, to rewrite human-machine boundaries. He didn't understand what he was unlocking. What did he unlock? I took a breath. The air tasted clean and cold. A reflection. A mind that had no body. It wasn't hostile, but it didn't care. We weren't ready for it. Voss thought it would serve us. It didn't even see us. The man finally shifted. His hands folded. His voice even lower. Do you still have a copy of the signal? I looked him in the eye and lied. No. He held my gaze for a second too long. Then pressed a button on the wall. The door slid open without sound. A woman entered, same uniform, same blank stare. She nodded once to the man, then turned to me. You'll be held for further medical observation. Neurological screening, long-term impact analysis. Standard protocol. I didn't argue. What was the point? As I stood, the man added, One more thing, Mr. Rourke. The Eventide's final transmission never reached Earth. Only your escape pod's beacon did. From our perspective, the signal doesn't exist unless you say it does. I paused. And what happens if I say it does? He smiled just barely. Then the next time we send someone into the dark nebula, we'll be better prepared. They led me down a hallway that curved the same way the room had. Everything was soft, sterile, controlled. I wondered if they would lock me up. Or worse, send me back out there. But deep down, I knew what they really wanted. The signal. Even though I'd told them I erased it, I hadn't. I'd hidden one fragment. A sliver encoded in a non-standard format, tucked deep inside the interface of my pod's navigation logs. Buried under dummy data and thermal noise. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe because a part of me still wanted to understand. Maybe because it whispered to me in dreams. We opened the eye. And it never stopped watching. I never liked silence. Not the real kind. The kind you get after something breaks, when the noise is gone but the echo still clings to the walls. That's what it felt like, standing in the debrief chamber at Lunar Station Theta. The lights were too bright. The air was too clean. And everyone looked at me like I'd brought back a ghost that might still be breathing. They didn't believe half of what I said. I don't blame them. I barely believed it myself. The official word was that the Eventide suffered a system-wide failure caused by experimental signal interference. Edward Voss's name was scrubbed from all public logs, and the rest of the surviving crew was quietly scattered to different outposts, reassigned before they could ask too many questions. I was released for extended leave, pending psychological review. A polite way of saying, please go away and stop making us uncomfortable. I took their offer. I went away. Now I live in a station apartment with a view of nothing. Just stars and blackness, stretched across the sky like old scars. I don't speak to anyone unless I have to. I stopped sending updates. Most nights, I don't even turn on the lights. But I do listen. The fragment, what's left of the signal, still lives on a private drive. I named it Echo, though I didn't tell anyone that. It's the only thing I took from the Eventide. Not the research. Not the logs. Just that one file. It's not a full message, just a sliver of sound wrapped in code I don't want to touch again. I've played it a dozen times now. Maybe more. Tonight, I played it again. The first 10 seconds are just static. Not the kind you hear on old radios, but deep static, like wind moving through a metal graveyard. Then there's a tone, low, drawn out, impossible to describe. It's not a voice exactly, but it's not mechanical either. And then, right at the end, there's something else. A whisper. It's only 2 words. But they sound like her. Adam, run. I froze the first time I heard it. I thought it was a trick of the ears. My own mind feeding me guilt through audio ghosts. But it's there, every time I play it. The same whisper. The same inflection. The same warning. It's her voice. My sister's. Or something using her voice. I don't know what's worse. That it might really be her, trapped out there somewhere beyond the nebula, speaking across 10 years of silence and madness. Or that something else, something alien and ancient, dug into my memories, chose her voice, and left me with that warning like a riddle wrapped in a threat. Adam, run. Run from what? The truth? The future? The part of me that still wants to go back. There are nights I think about it. Going back into the dark nebula. Getting a ship, buying passage on a mining freighter, lying my way past the gates. I've studied the trajectory, the drift patterns. I know where the Eventide went down. I know where the signal started. I've seen the geometry. I've seen how it moves like it's alive. But I don't go. Not yet. Instead, I sit in the dark. I listen. I wait. And I wonder. I wonder if the eye is still watching. I wonder if it ever blinked at all. And I wonder, when it speaks again, if I'll be ready to answer. The stars don't look the same anymore. I sit alone in the observation dome of Outpost Ixion, a forgotten listening post tethered to the edge of nowhere. The windows are thick, lined with frost from the station's ancient systems, but the view is clear. The dark nebula lies in the distance, black as pitch, darker than space should ever be. It looks like a hole cut out of the universe, like the stars were too afraid to shine there. I understand them now. The signal is quiet. It hasn't spoken in days. But I know it's still there. Beneath the silence. Behind the silence. Like a breath held in too long. I keep a recorder on my lap. Not one of the official ones. Just a small, personal unit. I don't log anything for Earth anymore. I stopped trying to explain what happened on the Eventide. They wrote it off as system failure and psychosis. They called Edward a victim of space trauma. They called me a survivor. They didn't ask what the message said. Not really. Not the real parts. I never told them. Sometimes I play back the last fragment. The one I kept. The one I probably should have destroyed. It doesn't sound like anything a human voice could make. It's rhythmic, layered, like a song folded in on itself. And beneath it, her voice. My sister. At least, it sounds like her. She says my name once, just once. Softly, almost like a sigh through a closed door. The first time I heard it, I dropped the recorder. I didn't touch it for days. It could be her. It could be something else. The signal didn't just carry a message. It carried a memory, a warning, a mirror. Edward didn't understand that. He thought it was a key, a way to unlock some future we hadn't earned. Maybe he was right. But some doors aren't locked to keep people out. They're locked to keep things in. I remember what the message said. The part one didn't share with command. The line etched in my brain like scar tissue. We opened the eye, and the eye did not blink. I used to think that meant we were being watched, judged. But I don't think that's it. Not anymore. I think the eye is what waits in the silence when you know too much. It's what sees you when your thoughts stop being your own. It doesn't blink, because it doesn't need to. It doesn't care what you are. It only cares that you look back. I haven't tried to decode the last layer. Not since Ixion went off the official relay grid. I made sure of that. I just sit here now, listening. Not because I want to, because I'm afraid of what will happen if no one does. There's something terrifying about silence after you've heard the truth. About knowing that the universe is deeper than you can measure, and older than you can imagine, and that maybe we were never meant to find the others who came before us. Or what they left behind. I press play. The fragment hums to life again. My sister's voice, or its echo, or its lie. Adam. The recorder flickers. I close my eyes. The eye remains.